guys, I'm Alice. I'm on the study committee. I'm Alice Laughlin. I'm on the study committee. Hi, everyone. You're familiar. You just saw my face. I'm Alice. I'm the chair of your school board, and I'm also the chair of the Act 46 study committee and also of the WSEU, which is your supervisory union board. The folks you have up here, they're going to introduce themselves, but there are two groups here. There's the study committee, and there's the Putney Town School District Board.
Sergio Simunovic, Putney Town School Board.
Beth Bristol, I'm on the Guilford Town School Board and also the Act 46 Study Committee.
And I'm Richard Glazier. I was on the Putney School Board until February. I stepped off at that point. However, I remained on the Act 46 Study Committee.
Emily House, Putney Town School Board.
Frank Rucker, Wyndham Southeast Supervisor Union Business Manager.
This is Annie Beekman. She lost her voice. And I'm Laura Chapman. We're both the Putney Town School Board.
Do you want to introduce Lyle back there? And Herb?
You want to? Oh, you're Herb. Lyle?
I'm Lyle Holiday, technologically challenged, but superintendent of schools.
Excellent. Is there anybody else? Super. Well, welcome. This is one of many sessions that we have done as the Act 46 Study Committee to introduce, or not to introduce, it's been talked about for years now as in our process, but to come back to each of our communities to talk about the Articles of Agreement that were formed by the Act 46 Study Committee, to present them again to you, to our communities, and also to answer questions that you might have. We have a short slideshow that will go through some of the details of our decision-making process and the kinds of things that we came to in terms of a conclusion. So we're going to do that as we go through. With questions, I'm thinking about with questions, maybe after every couple of slides, we'll stop and see if there are questions, and then we'll keep going after that. And while we're doing the slides part of it, if you could keep your questions associated to those particular details, then we will open up for much larger questions at the very end. Does that sound like a fair way to proceed? Everybody? And the articles, thank you, are right there on the front seat so that you can see those as well. Excellent. So let's go to our first slide. And I'm going to look at it here so I don't have to keep turning around. Why now Act 46? It's the law. Number of questions that we've had with folks along the way is that the vote on Tuesday is a vote for or against Act 46. It is not. We don't get to vote for or against Act 46. Act 46 is a law that's been handed down to us, and the study committee's work and your school board's work has been to find its way to negotiate that law that was gifted to us. It was a law designed to address the increasing costs and widespread inequities of education across the state. This isn't going to work if we're going back and forth. So, Act 46, an act relating to making amendments to education funding, education spending, and education governance, requires districts to evaluate the education provided to their students, its cost to their taxpayers, and its sustainability by 2018, aims to simplify the educational governance system, and provides options. The 5 towns of the WSESU created an official study committee to figure out how best to comply with the law. Over the last year, the study committee has met more than 30 times, so maybe to pause on that. We began together with great suspicion of Act 46 and maybe a little bit of suspicion for each other as members of different communities coming together. I think one of the things that everybody on the study committee would agree or would suggest is that process has been an important process for us to see the ways in which we, as different communities, really share many common goals, or in fact share all the most important common goals as a community. And as we made our way through this process, saw how, as a collective, we could care better for all of our children. and that's another piece that you'll hear from us over and over again, is thinking about children much more broadly than our individual Putney children or Guilford children or Dummerston children, but all of our Wyndham Southeast children.
You folks are actually looking at the presentation that we gave when the Vernon vote came up. So the last couple of slides may have confused you, and so Lyle's just adjusting. But everything Richard has said is part of the presentation, just the slides are wrong.
So can I ask, are my slides the right slides?
They are.
Thank you, all right, because I was sitting here saying, oh, I may have old slides. All right, so where are we then? Perfect, it matches great. Act 46, five goals. Provide substantive equity in the quality and variety of educational opportunities statewide. Lead students to achieve or exceed the state education's quality standards. Maximize operational efficiencies through increased flexibility to manage, share, and transfer resources with the goal of increasing the district-level ratio of students to full-time equivalent staff. Promote transparency and accountability, and delivered at a cost that parents, voters, and taxpayers value. Who is WSESU? Guilford, Brattleboro, Dummerston, Putney. Technically, Vernon has voted to secede from that supervisory union, but we still have a connection. Study committee process, a 2-year journey. School board members from all districts voting and alternate members. I was an alternate member when Alice took over as became elected the chair of that committee. It really felt to me at times to represent Putney because Alice was busy being chair. Alternated meetings locations, regular meetings, work sessions, informal meeting, informational meetings, small groups, Q&A with Secretary of Ed, Q&A with the AOE. Let's pause for a minute on the school piece. One of the, I think, the pieces that was really good for the study committee was to spend time in every single school in the district, in the supervisory union. And we moved around many of our colleagues from around the county, around the supervisory union, got to sample our cuisine and our food. It was I think a major point for folks to see how our food service worked as an in-house food service. Do you want to say something? I don't mind at all.
This particular slide I think is really important because I want everybody to understand how long of a process it has been for all of us and how thorough we have been. So I would venture to say that all of us were very skeptical when this started and probably felt the same uncertainty that you all feel right now. And over 2 years, you can see from this slide what we have done to arrive at where we are today and what we're going to present to you tonight. Not only our regular meetings and work sessions, but we held community forums, we met with state officials, we talked to a ton of people. So our initial reaction has progressed over 2 years to where we are now. So if you're just kind of jumping onto the Act 46 bandwagon with us, it is a big jump to understand what we've done in 2 years in a short period of time. So we appreciate that, and that's why we're here to answer questions and help you to arrive at your conclusion.
Thank you, Beth. And of course, all of our meetings were televised on local access TV, and then if you're interested as you jump into this process, all of our agenda items, our minutes, documents in different iterations are all available on the website at the supervisory. So, again, why are we here, and why is Act 46 here? Our challenges: declining enrollment. You can see on the next slide that in 2002, we were at a BUHS total enrollment was at 1418, and in 2015, it's at 1104, I believe. Frank, it's at 1,040 something right now. And we can see that mapped out across all of our districts. I won't go through each one of those. You can see Putney in orange on the top. Again, starting at, going at 2002 at 244 students, at 2015, 165. Next slide gives you another, these several slides that are coming all demonstrate this declining enrollment. This is the Brattleboro town. If you look at the next one after that, you have it more specific numbers listed out, not on a graph form, but you can see the percentage change for BUHS and elementary in Brattleboro town. Student enrollment as of September of this year, Brattleboro Town at 725, BAMS at 293, BUHS at 776, Dummerston at 145, Guilford at 110, Putney at 175. Total of 222. Yes, please.
Frank, can you clarify the numbers of the three Brattleboro schools?
Yeah.
Sure. We have, well, first of all, just what you see here, we have the UHS on one document. I don't know if we've got that far. It's cumulative, and then we have the BAMS UHS separated by the 2 grade levels. At the Brattleboro Town schools, we have Oak Grove Academy School and Green Street. They have seen the same drop in enrollment, and in fact, for just this year that we're in, when we went to set the tax rates, the equalized student count in Brattleboro Town School District dropped 10% in 1 year, which is a very dramatic impact on school tax rates because school tax rates are set by cost per student.
Thank you, Frank. The next slide gives you some of the data that Frank just provided, specifically about the 3 elementary schools, but also gives Dummerston, Guilford, Putney. Next slide after that, Brattleboro Union High School District's number 6 enrollment, I believe, talking to Frank, that number, that 1069 number includes both Brattleboro High School and BAMS. So you can see the way in which that's broken out as well. Going on again. Our challenge is increasing education spending. So in FY 2005, WSESU schools were 10,942 per student. State average 8,974, and 15. That number had risen to 15,875, and the state average going up faster or more at 14,008. Increase per student 45%, 56% was the state average. Next slide. Leading again to increased education spending all the way into 2015 spending per student, and this is broken down by each of the schools districts themselves. And you can see Putney here at 16,730. Maybe to pause for a second on that number on the right-hand side of that column, the 16,166. That's the state cap on per student. Make sure I get this right, Frank. Right? The state cap for spending per student. If you exceed that cap, there is an extra tax that goes to you that you have to that the members of the community will have to pay. As a school board member, in going through 3 separate budgets, our goal always was to stay below that cap, because every dollar you spend over that, you're losing more money, even in terms of your state, the penalty that you pay. And that number becomes crucial as we talk about how we calculate the number of students that number serves. And we'll get to that in a second as well. Let's keep going. So the next piece to this is that's important for our consideration was rising poverty across all of our districts. In this next slide, you can see Putney is in the dark blue, which is the line 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th line down on the right side. But in every single instance, we see a rise in poverty from 2006. Next slide. Since August 2015, study committee members have worked collaboratively, studied data for our districts, like the data you just saw, learned about each other's schools and communities, listened to public input, solicited feedback from our local school boards to create the report with articles of agreement that was unanimously approved by the study committee and by the Vermont Board of Education, with commendations for its work, especially regarding school leadership councils. Now our communities can decide when voters cast their ballots on 11/7. Yeah, so let's pause for questions at this point.
I think everyone can hear me.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Yeah. It seems obvious we have to figure out a way to make expenses work better. So they're going up and this and that. But was this the only idea that was looked at? Surely there's got to be some other ways to do this besides getting into a big group.
In the later slide, we talk a little bit more about the specific other options that we explored. At the very beginning, just to kind of anecdotally a little bit to describe that, it was our interest coming in to look at a variety of options, and we did do that. We had subcommittees of our group that went and looked at every possible option. We have spreadsheets where those are listed out in terms of what the requirements are to do those options, and we kept based upon the information in terms of what the status of our supervisory union looked like. The direction kept pointing away from those options into what would have been a conventional or accelerated merger. The Vernon piece made it more complicated, as you all know. We don't have to go into that part now in terms of Vernon school choice. That change made it very difficult for us to go any further in terms of either a conventional or accelerated merger because they had choice and nobody else had choice. And in order for us to merge as a group at that point, we would have had to, they would have either had to give up choice or we all would have had to go into choice, and that was one of the things that we spent a significant time examining and discussing.
I think what we found is when we started to look at some of the other options, it kept coming back to the state funding formula and the fact that it's based on the cost per student. And so as long as the options remained counting the number of students in your school district, then we weren't addressing the cost per student issue. So what we found is we really needed to look at an option where we were able to broaden our student count so that it would have an impact on our cost per student. And so the only way that we could impact cost per student and broaden that student count was to join together as more than one. So you're right, there's lots of other kind of configurations that you could look at, but it kept coming back to how does that impact cost per student? And we were not able to find a solution that was better than this one.
And maybe to pause on that one more time too, at that $1,600, we'll use that as a round number for a minute as the cap. I think that was 2015's number. 16,000 in 2015. For the school, I mean, and this is one of those things I don't think I realized until I was on the school board and had to make budget recommendations and budget decisions that we would then bring before all of you, which is every time that we add anything, it has to be cut across, that addition is only divided then for the cost per pupil around the number of students in Putney that we have in that board. And I know this number isn't right. So say it's 200 students, which is high, but it makes the math easier. So if we have 200 students and we wanted to add Spanish as a language, and say we wanted to do that, and Frank, this is all back of the envelope part, so I'm not sure he'll get it that way. But say we have 200 students, and say we wanted to add Spanish, and say for just a round number, we said the total cost for that was $50,000. With that 200 students, we would have to be able to take that $50,000, cut it, divide it by 200, which is $250. Someone's better math than me. $250. What that means is for that $1,600, just to do Spanish is $250 per student. It pulls us up above that threshold by $250. As your numbers of students are declining, that number of 250 keeps going up higher and higher because you have fewer students to divide it by. So all of this about Act 46 is really important. The real issue for me as a former school board member and as a resident and as someone deeply concerned about education is that funding formula is a losing battle for everybody in small schools. Because as your numbers decline, you're having to pull down services that you provide, and each one of them becomes more and more expensive because you have fewer relative to this formula that the state uses that penalizes us as we get smaller. So just to say we would keep it the same and we could do it all, that doesn't work because the numbers keep getting smaller, the expenses keep going up, and you have to divide that number by smaller and smaller numbers of students. And to come back to Beth's comment, when you put it all together and you're at 2,000 students, that $50,000, that cost over that number is much smaller. Yeah, it's the same $50,000, but you're not penalized for it in the same way that the state will do it by that funding formula. Did I get that? So there are other questions.
So I'm curious, and maybe this is so obvious. Thanks. I'm just curious about all the reasons why the student enrollments are declining. Is this totally because of people leaving, not as many people moving in, or did you find that more people are homeschooling their children, or more people are sending them out to private schools? Are there other reasons besides declining population that are contributing to the declining enrollments?
Yeah, I mean, it's, as Frank just said, it's a statewide issue. I'm in higher education. I have colleagues and friends in the state education system in higher ed. One of the comments I heard from one of those folks recently was, Vermont's chief export is educated young people, right? They go out, they don't come back, they have children in other places, so our numbers are declining. And that's a big piece of it. Maybe to address one more part to that, when we came onto the school, there was a group of us that came onto the school board 4 years ago almost now. 4 years ago. One of the first things that we did as a brand new school board was to talk about Putney as a destination school. I've been in Putney, I moved here in 2010. My wife's family is from this area. We came from Chicago. Like I said, I'm in higher ed and moved around. I've been in Idaho, I've been in Missouri, I've been in New Hampshire. We chose Putney because of the school. I mean, there were two big features. One was the school. We had our oldest son was going into 6th grade. Our youngest son was going into 2nd grade. We loved the idea of a pre-K through 8th grade school. That was really important to us. We loved, Brattleboro was great, but for our children coming from a very different kind of environment, we thought this was a great place for them to grow up and a great place for them to come to school. The second piece, and I always want to plug this up, we have a library, which is really lovely, and that's a second, unrelated but important piece. And so one of the things that we talked at length about was how do we think, we think about Putney as a destination place, and that the school is fundamental to that, fundamental to our vision of Putney as a destination for people to come and to move and to bring for young people to return to and to bring their children. So as we entered this Act 46 process, we kept coming back to that strategic planning process that said, we're all about making this school great and making Putney great so that we attract people in rather than follow the demographic that's affecting all of Vermont, which is losing young people, losing families. So I wanted to, Alice just pointed that out, but I wanted to pause on that for a minute because people think that, oh, there are folks that are for this because of the tax incentives. That was never the issue for us. The issue for us was all about what makes Putney the strongest possible school, what will best keep our middle school here, and I know Beth can speak to what happened in Guilford in terms of their decision to send their students out to Brattleboro Middle School. We believe in this process that by going to this model that would allow students to, this will come up in a second, but we're on this point, right? That will allow students, because as one district, to move between schools, between towns, that actually is a long-term solution to keeping our middle school, because there will be members of communities in Guilford, members of communities in Brattleboro, and that may choose to come to Putney specifically because of the middle school, while also staying in their hometowns. That was something that I know we wrestled with over and over again. I know it's talking to my neighbors, that's the thing that most bothers them is, oh, if we do this, we're going to lose our middle school. And I think if you look at the demographics as they are now, and if you look at in terms of where we are, number-wise, at a certain point, we will have to make a decision to not have our middle school as a group, because that number is going to keep going down to the point where we're then going to have to decide, is there enough critical mass here of students to have a meaningful experience, to have an equitable experience for students? Do you want to talk a little bit about your decision?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what happened at Guilford, and that kind of preceded my time on the school board, so I can't talk about it in too much detail, but I do know that it became exactly what we've been talking about, where the cost is not resulting in the outcome that you're looking for. So the opportunities were not there for our middle schoolers that we wanted to be able to offer at a cost that we could afford. And so we made the decision as a town, and it was a contentious decision, extremely, but we made the decision as a town that we could provide more opportunities for our children by sending them to BAMS. And by all means, there would be many students in Guilford today that would opt to come to a smaller school. Although the feedback we've received and we follow up yearly is that they're having a great experience at BAMS. So I think it just comes down to what you're able to offer at a price that your town can afford. And Guilford's perhaps a little bit ahead of the curve on the financial crisis or the financial impact. We're feeling it more right now than some of the other schools, and so we unfortunately faced that decision before you all, but I think it's probably only a matter of time.
Other questions? And we have a lot more slides to go to, but let's do some questions.
It seems that, so far anyway, the main point I've picked up is that based on prior demographics, based on a trend that you've identified from 2002 to the present day, you're creating a future path with the assumption that the trends that we're seeing will continue. I'm sure you all have some very strong evidence that would support the belief that the trends that we've experienced will continue and that the population will continue to go down. And it's not just Vermont, it's New Hampshire as well. It's a regional issue that everyone's wrestling with, economics as well, the SEDS that are being done for the different economic regions as well. You've not shared any of that evidence with us, so at this point, all I understand is that the demographics are on a downward trend, and that you're convinced that that downward trend will continue, and that the population will continue to go down. And just to mention, my family is exactly the same situation you spoke of. We moved here 4 months ago for this school, and we have 2 kids, and we wanted to be here. It took us 3 years to sell our place. So I'm not entirely convinced that Putney is the next in line. I think Putney is in some ways unique and especially wonderful. But it might help all of us if you have more of a sense of how your belief that the demographics the downward trend will continue beyond today, and for how long?
So we really hope the downward trend does not, but we know if we lost 10% last year, we have room for 10% growth next year. And we have room for the 2%, 3%, 5% from the previous year. We have lost enough students so that we would love a 10% growth in any year, and we can accommodate them easily.
I think the other piece to the equation is even if our population remained stagnant for a while or even grew, we do know that our costs are going to go up. And so it's a two-edged sword that, you know, if the costs are going to continue to grow up, and even if your population stays the same, you're still going to see an increase in cost per student. And so I think that's what we kept in mind. You know, I don't know that we have any concrete projections for the future, but I think looking at the past and speaking to what Lyle said and knowing that our costs are certainly going to go up, the math doesn't work.
In Dummerston, we monitor birth rates and the families that are moving in. We're a small enough community like Putney that where the school is keeping track, and we do not see any improvements to the trends, the downward trend, looking at that particular data, and that's looking like 5 years ahead. So
we're gonna just take a couple more slides, and then we'll come back to questions. I probably just want to. Okay.
So looking at your statement about 2,000 versus 200 students, and I'm wondering whether you're going to have the same expense for your Spanish teacher for 2,000 students as for 200. So you were taking this one, $50,000, I can't remember, expense for 200 students. If that same person is going to have to teach 2,000 people, that doesn't sound necessarily like it's,
What it means is that for a school like Putney, so I'm talking about if we wanted to add Spanish in Putney with 200 students, that in a consolidated district, that number isn't regulated to Putney's number. It's all of our numbers. So anytime, whether you're in Guilford, you want to add a teacher or a program, or you're in Brattleboro, or you're in Dummerston, you're now, in terms of the funding formula, you're now spreading that cost across a wider number of students, regardless of where they teach. It's not that the one Spanish teacher will teach 2,000 students or will go to multiple schools. No, they will teach Putney students. But the cost in terms of what that does relative to the cap of the funding formula is much lower and much smaller, and you would be able to afford to do multiple Spanish teachers across the whole district at a reduced. It's the same. I don't want to make it sound like it's a cost difference, because it isn't. It's still the same $50,000. It's just for the funding formula, from the state's perspective, that penalizes you for going above it, and that's the part that's really, you know, there already is before Act 46, the funding formula already puts you on a path to consolidation because you need more students in order to stay below that cap. That's just, you know, that's just the reality. And as people, you know, in this process over the last 2 years, talking to many of my neighbors and people on the street who, you know, are angry about this, and my response always is, don't be, you know, we're following the law. The funding formula really is the thing to be angry about. It puts us in a position where it is continually pressing us, and the only way to get relief is you have to be bigger. You have to have more students.
Point of clarification on that, Richard, sorry. I'm just wondering, my understanding is, and I'm just speculating, that there's also scenarios in which, for example, there might be X number of students at Putney who want to take Spanish and X number of students at Guilford who want to take Spanish, but it's only a 20-hour-a-week position in Putney and or in Guilford, and being able to share those resources is also a means of saving.
Yeah, and that's later on in the slide. One of the things that this allows us to do in very uncomplicated ways is to share resources across schools. Let's do a few more things, and we'll come back. Really, all of your questions will be answered, but let's cover some more information as we go. Yeah, I won't read all through, maybe I will. You know, what did we study? You asked that. What are the things that we looked at? Academic programming, extended day programming, summer programming, enrichment, Title I, buildings and assets, pre-K programming, support system, school choice, test results, staffing, student placement, building use, administrative time, enrollment trends, small schools, sustainability, community culture, technology, efficiencies, finances, special education, class size, per student cost, endowments, capital plans, scholarship funds, music and arts, science, mathematics, writing support. All of these things were things that came up at different points over the last 2 years. We found differences in equity, differences in the quality and variety of educational opportunities in our schools. Go on to the next slide. We looked at educational outcomes, and these are SBAC scores from 2016, ELA and math by area. Oftentimes, and I want to be corrected in case I get this not right, there's often a correlation between poverty level and test scores. This is not something new. I mean, this has always been true. But even if you look at some of these scores in different communities, Academy, for example, is a great example where the poverty level is 74%, but the SBAC score is 67%, SBAC in math 56%, versus Putney, we have a 63% SBAC in ELA, 46% in math, and our poverty level is 49%. So one of the things we might ask is, what is it about our system that does not support students in the same way, for example, as Academy? How does Academy buck a trend around test scores? And again, we all know that test scores isn't the be-all and end-all of education, but it is one indicator, and it's an indicator that a lot of people look at. Here's an example of equity. Here's an example where one school, Academy, is able to do things that we in Putney are not able to do, in fact, in part because of size.
Richard, could you just clarify, are the percentages in the schools the percent of students meeting a standard?
I think that's a
Meeting
proficiency.
proficiency.
Yes, meeting proficiency.
Meeting
or exceeding. Thank you. No, great question. Thank you. And we won't go through all of those, but this was an area where we spent a considerable amount of time talking about equity. Sure.
Can you quickly clarify what poverty level means as well?
Sure. I'm going to pass off this
Yes, and in this case, it's the number of students who parents have responded to the school's request to share income information that then is reviewed. It's reviewed under the basis of whether or not a student or a family qualifies for the USDA Child Nutrition Program free or reduced lunch program. And that is there are a lot of poverty measures. This one is the one that's used by most schools for a university.
Do you want to point out about high school and
Yeah, and some folks, you know, would make the observation that. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, what is the measure of poverty? What is it indicating? And so in this case, it is specific to the local response to the survey. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I was just asked to clarify is, you know, folks that are looking at these numbers and they say, well, gee, all of these schools feed into the high school. How could that weighted average, you know, when everything's higher, you know, coming into the high school and everybody ends up there, how could the high school be so much lower? And the answer again is, it is common across Vermont and the country where when folks get to the high school, they tend not to respond to those income questionnaires. And this poverty rating is dependent on a response from the community, the students and the family. So if a family doesn't respond, then the data is not captured.
More slides here. Next slide. Oops. We found differences in cost and spending. We also discussed alternative options for merging, but found none of them to result in the outcomes with greater benefits than our current proposal. And I'm going to come back to it. A big piece of this has to do with the funding formula. What is it that we're able to do, and what kind of services and equity can we provide with that restriction? So, you know, conversations about, oh, what if two of these towns formed a district by themselves, Dummerston and Putney? Again, the student numbers don't give you enough of a savings, even if that were possible, to make that merger worth it. We looked at reds, side-by-sides, layered, modified union, offering school choice, retaining the same structure. We believe the merger we created is the best option for our kids, a merger that allows small schools to stay open, improves educational opportunities, and addresses the many concerns in our community, a merger that addresses the 5 goals of Act 46. The merger offers our communities more value, it builds on our strengths, retains our school cultures, and addresses our weaknesses. It offers an opportunity for increased community involvement. This is a material that we put together that we sent out. A merger achieves, and I won't read all of this because just to save a little bit of this, right? The merger achieves educational equity within individual schools and between districts. I mean, one of the things that this is about is not just, is it equitable that Green Street does this and Putney does that? No, is it equitable within the school itself that we have students that are served one way and other students who are not served? It addresses sustainability around the issues we've already discussed, efficiency, collaboration, and educational opportunity. Collaborations offer efficiencies and learning opportunities. As the supervisory union has already realized with special education, collaboration between districts allows for greater flexibility with staffing, programming, and administrative tasks, thus increasing efficiency. Through efficiencies and collaboration, we will be able to offer enhanced programming that will benefit all students. Local leadership, and I think the slide after, no, it doesn't. We will pause on that. Local leadership. With the addition of meaningful individual leadership councils, the number of volunteers engaged in our schools will almost double. They will work to maintain local identity and local school and community culture. One of the things that we brought up, I'll do this part and I'll open questions again. One of the things that was important that Alice and I talked about, I think this was before one of the first meetings, was considering what it is about our school board and our relationship to our community that this merger, if not done right, we would lose. And the piece that we came up with was this idea of leadership councils. And I believe when it was reviewed by the state said, this is a great idea, I wish everybody had done it. And the leadership councils offer opportunities, and this may come up later on in the slide, so I won't go into great detail, but offers opportunities for every individual school to have members of the community, members of the school team, to engage in literally the leadership of all aspects of the school. That would function in many ways in terms of what is most noticeable to the community as a school board. It's not a school board, I have to be careful about saying it's a school board, because it's not. But it would function in terms of being able to engage with the public, to engage with teachers, to engage with the principal and with the superintendent, to better the school and to be thinking about the school in its most intimate way. One of my favorite moments in this Act 46 process, the study group committee process, was when the folks in Brattleboro realized we don't have that at all right now. They have a school board that covers a number of schools. And their school board thinks of them all, well, they know they're all different, but there's no individual connection to individual schools. So what was a real gift for Brattleboro was for them to realize, oh, we can actually have individual leadership councils for Green Street, right? For schools that right now don't have that kind of local community control, if I want to use that word, input, supervision, leadership. And that was something, I think, of all the things in the Articles of Agreement that we spent the most time on, that was the one. It required a lot of legal maneuvering back and forth because it could not be a board. That's specifically stated in Act 46. And I think all of us feel very proud about that piece, because one of the things that we also recognized was that, I don't want to ask this individually here, there are a number of members of the school board here who didn't get elected. And I'll start by me. My first year on the school board, I was not elected, I was appointed, because nobody ran. And can I ask that right? How many on our school board right now did not get elected? Oh, you're on the, no, on our school board. So you're replaced. So there says something when we can't pull enough people in on a regular basis, and this is every single year. This isn't just this year. This is mine was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. The idea that we would have leadership councils that, in some senses, become much more. The comment about local, right? Keeping it close, keeping it intimate to the people that it most matters to. The leadership councils are all about that. Teachers are on the leadership council, students are on the leadership council. A member of the whatever the supervisory board becomes, that one of those members will be a liaison with that leadership council, and there'll be local engagement in all school issues that are handled at that level that will then be communicated up to the larger board. And I think I wanted to pause on that because I wanted to assure folks that was something that we felt deeply about, that we did not want to lose that local engagement with the school. And the leadership councils offered up one way to do that. There's a question back there. And I'll stop for a little bit.
A local culture is one thing. Putney Central has two concrete elements that I am not sure exist in other schools, and I wonder what will happen to them. We just voted to maintain the school forest in the town in case the merger goes through. What will happen to the Putney endowment, the Putney Central School endowment, which Anne Fine started and which has is a pot of money that is available to benefit Putney students? And what will happen to the preschool? As far as I know, Putney is the only school in the district? No, none. So my question is, this is something that Putney has, that we worked hard for, and will we continue to have it as a sign of equity?
So I thought we were the only town with an endowment or school, but with an endowment, but that's actually not the case. Several of the schools have endowments, and several of them have endowments that are much larger than ours. So the discussion at the study committee was that those endowments would stay with the schools. So the leadership council would take on the management of that. So we created this great pre-K in 2013, which I was on the committee that worked on that, and I have to say that was one of my proudest moments of the last several years. And that inspired Guilford to start a pre-K, and Dummerston is now very invested in having that conversation as well. I really have a hard time imagining the pre-K program going away. The benefits are vast. Brattleboro has been talking about a pre-K for a couple of years, I think pretty tentatively, because they've had Head Start, which I know is a completely different beast. But I would imagine that a new unified union board would be looking very closely at that for Brattleboro and for any other school that didn't, and Dummerston if it wasn't established there. That being said, the articles very clearly say that that program would not go anywhere for at least 5 years. And that process of 5 years wouldn't start until the day the union board, the new entity, became operational. So that pre-K for Putney Central School, Putney Families, isn't going anywhere for quite some time. But again, the benefits of that are vast, right? Not only socially and in the educational realms, but the finances. I mean, obviously they're attached. If you start educating and socializing kids when they're really young, you're not going to be paying for perhaps special ed later on, and special ed is very expensive. So, you know, a unified union board would be looking at that.
I really like the idea of these,
Hold on, wait.
right, got a quiet voice too. I like the idea of the school leadership councils. However, I'm concerned that the super board, the council itself doesn't have any power. It can talk to that super board, but it can't make them do anything. And whether we merge or we don't merge, if we don't merge, I think we should take that on for Putney Central, period. But you have to make it at times when parents can actually participate and childcare needs to be provided. That's, why you're seeing a lot of what you're seeing with people not being on the school board. They can't do it. So yeah, that's a great piece, but ultimately it doesn't have any power.
So that's something that we discussed a lot, and share your concern. I think if we all had our way, we would give those leadership councils much more power, but we have some constraints within the law. But the more we talked about it and discussed it, we said, well, this unified board is going to be taking on some really big challenges. They're now going to be overseeing all of these schools, where right now we all oversee one school. So why wouldn't the unified board seek the input of individual councils that really genuinely know their school and can do a lot of that hands-on work for them and bring it back to the unified board, who I can't imagine would not be really receptive to suggestions. Ultimately, of course, the decision and the vote is going to be at the unified board level. But we couldn't think of a scenario where they wouldn't take the input of the local school community.
Maybe you could, but what
I want to just jump to one more thing in the next part, and then I'll open up just to add a few more things and come back to questions. The next thing on this list, supports students and families. A merger guarantees all children and families access to programs like universal meals, the option to remain at the same school even as a family moves within the district, and families will have options among schools in the district. And I want to pause on that one because I feel, as a school board member, I think I've told this story in a number of different places. We worked really hard, not this past year, but the year before, to guarantee universal meals for all of Putney students. And we thought we had done it. And I think we even came in front of all of you at town meeting and said, in a big smile, with a lot of pride, we did it. And we didn't, because the numbers didn't meet. And one of the things that in our role on the school board that I miss this year is the opportunities to talk with teachers. And what was most moving to me as a school board member and as a parent were when teachers came and when they asked, they said they wanted to talk about one thing with us that was the most important, and it was the nature, the kinds of things they work with on a daily basis in their classroom with students who come from risky environments, whether it be homelessness, whether it be food insecurity, whether it be abuse, whether it be any of these, and opiate addiction in the household, all of these pieces. And every single teacher, every single one, had a story of one or two or three students that they were working with at that exact moment that was dealing with those kinds of insecurity issues. And it were those conversations that really moved us to try to find a way to at least cover food. And by universal meals, when we get to that point, there are some families that still don't report their status so that they don't have access to universal meals because families don't, for various reasons, don't report them. And this, by moving into a situation where we are now consolidated, you saw those percentage numbers around poverty. That means that because those numbers with Brattleboro would then extend to all of us, we would, as a district now, have universal meals across all schools.
Can you just quickly describe what universal meals are?
Yeah, do you want to describe this better because you've got specifics more?
Well, universal, it's a complicated formula as to how you reach, you can justify in one's budget to have universal meals. There are 3 paths to universal meals. We really tried for a significantly long period of time to tread any of those paths. We just couldn't do it, even though money was built into our budget to supplement that. Universal meals are free meals for all the kids. That is breakfast and lunch. Kids do not have to bring in the paperwork for universal meals, and I cannot understate, well, how should I phrase this? If a kid has to go home and have their parents fill out paperwork about their finances and then bring it into the school, that puts the kid in a really awkward situation. More often than not, that kid or those parents are not going to come back into the school with that piece of paper. I mean, you understand why that's the case. Universal meals eliminates that. There's no stigma. You just give the kids free food. And for those of us, and I know there are some in this room, who say, well, I don't want to pay for the food of other parents' kids, I have to say that these kids are your neighbors. These kids are everywhere. There's a lot of poverty in Putney. There's a lot of people a lot of parents whose kids are here the last day of school every June. The kids are crying in front of Carrie Harlow, who's in the kitchen, because she's not going to be feeding them anymore, because they're not going to be fed at home. So this is a real concern, and we did not consider this lightly when we could not, generate the funds to do that. And this is one of the potential perks of a merger that appeal to us.
Thank you, Alex. Questions?
Couple of questions and a couple of comments. One comment in terms of the financial piece, which the first few slides were emphasizing, is that the data is really clear, both from other states that have embarked in similar programs and within Vermont, that merged districts do not save money. That's real clear enough that the state is saying very clearly, if you want to merge to save money, that's not the reason to do it, because it does not save money. I think the idea of the leadership councils is terrific. I wish they had more teeth. They have no teeth now. They're strictly advisory. If we did not do a merger and we retain a school board, then, and I don't want to speculate on why people are or are not running for school board, but if we retain a local school board, then we don't have to do the sort of substitute dance around a leadership council, which is sort of an effort to replace the local input of the school board. I definitely appreciate the sense that we need to take care of our neighbors. I think that's a vital piece. I think we do that better in small towns than in a mega district. There's no question in my mind about that. I'm not so sanguine as some of you folks about what will happen in the future. I think Maggie's question about preschool or questions about the input of the leadership councils, when you say, I can't imagine why it would be different, you're looking many years down the road. And, you know, that's a little like Ron Staley saying, well, we've never done it that way, we would never do that. You don't know what kind of pressures are going to be on a school board or who's going to be sitting on them 5, 6, 7 years from now. And the notion that somehow we should trust a large district-wide school board because they'll show good sense and wouldn't take input. I'm not so sanguine about that. I've seen a lot of school boards come and go in the district. I've seen a lot of superintendents come and go in the district. And I have confidence in our small town managing its school much more effectively and with much more caring than a district that is essentially, in terms of the numbers, almost certainly going to be run out of Brattleboro, and with the numbers of people sitting on the school board will be almost certainly heavily weighted to Brattleboro. They don't relate to the concept, as you said earlier, they don't relate to the concept of smaller schools and the local smaller school community. It's not part of their vision. We live it all the time. So that's my comment.
Hi, this is Honey Warrington, and Tom, thank you for articulating so well my fears. But I also want to tell you thank you. This is huge work for years you've been doing. So thank you for your service. And I know you all come from really trying to fix a problem. And it's very sad to me to see these poverty levels and to know how many kids depend on the school for nutrition. So, and I have the same concerns Tom does. So this is a question probably not exactly for tonight, but I'm a businesswoman. I'm a good businesswoman. And one of the things I like to do is look at expenses, not just keep raising fees or whatever, and to see go over it with a fine-tooth comb even to say, you know, I wonder if we could get a better oil deal from a different company or a different phone system. Just going through picky, and see how to save money. I did that in my own business, I do it in my personal life. Regularly will call different oil companies up, and I'm amazed that it could be $1 a gallon difference. I do it with insurances, but that's the approach I never help with the school board do anything. So I would be happy to get picky on one of those, because maybe there's a way to bring down the expenses so we're not so, butting up against what the state is saying. And maybe you already did this, I don't know.
Yeah. Every school board has looked at all those different things. The problem is that it's labor.
Do you want to talk about bidding and all that?
Well,
Guys, we have about 15 slides left, and we started late, so it's 8 o'clock, so I just want us to be aware.
I'll get us to a flag.
And I can't speak for every board, but we've looked, when I was on the board, every board that I was on always looked at everything. Where can we save money? Because every time you're sweating over pennies. But this is a labor business. It's labor, and it's healthcare, and it's special ed. And I would like to make a point of those numbers keep dropping, and what has happened in the past is at a certain point you go, we're going to drop this teacher. And it's an awful thing to have someone lose their job, but we have less kids. That's how we're going to control costs. If we go to 50 kids, you're not going to have the same staffing that we have right now. So I feel like I got my right way, so I want to sort of
Thank you. And And the only thing I would add, in some ways in response to some of the other comments, is, again, you have to come back to the funding formula. And you can rail at Act 46 and at the ways in which we've tried to approach this, but in the end, it's the funding formula that doesn't go away. And so if you have real issues, you need to talk to your legislators about, because we are bound by that. And it's that funding formula that makes this unsustainable. Yep.
I wanted to speak to the, talk about the predictions of future. The future is uncertain, but what I do know personally, having served on the school board for 14 years now, and in Dummerston and on the SU level, is that there are a tremendous number of committed people that care deeply about schools and our public school and keeping our children safe and healthy and learning every day. And I do not see that going away. I think the high school board is an example, a perfect example of a larger board that's able to function and to serve all of our children's from all of our separate communities. And if Ricky Davidson were here, I think he could speak very eloquently to that it's not just about a Brattleboro student or what's best for Dummerston students. It's about looking at all of the students and what they need. And I think unification allows, if it were to actually happen, it would allow our communities and our public school system to be more nimble and efficient and be able to react to the needs of the students as they evolve and change with societal pressures and economic pressures.
Amy got us started on this, what does a unified district offer? So let me go through some more slides and we'll come back to questions again. What does a unified district offer? One board looking at the programming and opportunities for students in all buildings, basing student outcomes on one continuous improvement plan, one hiring structure for all employees, retaining high quality staff, removing the obstacles from regulatory agencies such as IRS and Labor Standard Board regarding shared employment, cohesive leadership team creating capacity for meeting the challenges in all schools, reviewing policy and strategy through a cohesive lens. Staff will be shared as agreed upon, behavior programs, new curriculums, best practices, teacher leaders. Program expansion opportunities will increase with the ability to share staff and could include technology integrationist, school-based social worker, foreign language teacher, pre-K programs in more schools, after-school and summer school programming. And I'll come back to the school-based social worker, which would be something that would be a wonderful opportunity for our students and for our teachers. How will our school governance structure be different? And this is where I think you can see the representational system that will follow. All of our towns will then form one governance unit. Before 6 separate boards, now 1 district board and 9 leadership councils. The next piece gives the representation breakdown. 4 representatives will reside in Brattleboro, 1 representative will reside in Dummerston, 1 representative will reside in Guilford, 1 representative will reside in Putney, 2 representatives will reside in any of the 4 towns, and this is based on population for the most recent census. The one thing I want to pause on this, and I'm not going to remember this option, but there was another option that we could have followed that would have given Brattleboro designated majority on every issue all the way through. And they could have, by right, said, we want that. And they didn't. They said they understood the concerns around small towns and their effect of only having 1 representative. And so that's what led us to this other option that allows 2 representatives to reside in any of the 4 towns. And frankly, and I've heard this, well, those people will be from Brattleboro. I don't think so. I think we have very activist groups in Putney and in Dummerston and Guilford that will run for these positions and will win these positions, and that small towns within the merged district will have significant representation all the way through. In addition, and I don't have the pieces in the next slide, I don't think this is there, but the ways in which votes will determine for closing schools will be, it's a year-long process, but in the end it requires a supermajority that would then mean at least one of the small town folks would have to okay that. So that, again, was not something that Brattleboro had to agree to, but they did out of their concerns around the fears that our individual communities might have. Let me keep going to the end, and I know there'll be questions that will come from that. What are the leadership councils? I think we talked about this, so I'm going to skip that slide. Who will be on the leadership councils? I'll be a school principal, a staff member nominated by their peers and appointed by the district board chair, 3 community members nominated by the town meeting and appointed by the district board to serve for 1-year terms, 1 student representative selected by school principal for participation as appropriate or necessary or as topics dictate. What will be different? Town meeting. A vote on the individual school budget will no longer take place on the floor of town meeting. Community members are nominated for the leadership council at town meeting. Community discussion and budget input can take place during pre-town meeting. Leadership councils and the district board representative will present the budget. The district budget will be voted on separately in each town via Australian ballot on town meeting day. Oops. What will be different? More opportunities. Students won't have to leave their school if their families move from one of the 4 towns. One student might benefit from a small school setting. Another would prefer a different school dynamic. To go the other way for a second, I've talked to families who say, you know, I would love my, Putney families who would say, I would love my child to go to BAMS. There's a particular athletic program that they're strong in. Putney can't even get a baseball team. My son's tried that too. And for some families, they might make that choice. I actually think more would come our way than would go the other way. Teachers and other school staff could have their children attend school where they work. Unifying provides an opportunity for students to be in a school that best suits their needs. There are numerous educational benefits for individual children and their classroom communities when children are allowed to remain in the same school during their elementary years. How many more I got here? We no longer have a fear of schools closing. In a merged system, the smaller schools have more, not less, safeguards to keep them in their communities. No school can be closed in the first 5 years of the unified district, according to the Articles of Agreement, unless a town asks to be closed. With school closure discussions, there would be a lengthy process, including town input and considerations of how the town would be affected. This is really important. We built into the Articles of Agreement that the board needs to consider the effect on the community, the town, and specifically if that school would be closed. That has to be one of the pieces in any decision-making process. The town's input is specifically asked for. If a school is ever closed, the local community can purchase their school buildings back for a total of $1. Equity. A Wyndham Southeast would provide equity. And I love this slide because often people think equity is, oh, everyone has the same box, right? These are 3 children on boxes to see over a fence. And equity isn't that everyone has the same box. Equity is that everyone gets to see over the fence. And that might mean one person gets 1 box, one person gets 2, or one person gets 3, depending upon their need. What happens if the merger vote is successful? A $150,000 state transition grant to help move to a unified system. We decide how we want to unify rather than being told by the state. Schools receiving small school grants can continue to receive those grants. Greater chance of keeping our small schools open and viable. Tax breaks no longer available. But we do get, this is actually 2020, the 8 cents, 21, the 6 cents, 22, the 4 cents, and 23, the 2 cents. Again, this wasn't about the money part for us. It was about the other issues that we've already discussed.
But the tax rates
are available. Yeah, that's a wrong part of the slide. Thank you. What happened if the merger is voted down? Alice, I want to pass this to you because.
Sure. Do you want to do it live? Okay.
You want? Or I can ask Frank to do it as well.
My voice is sore. That's why.
Okay.
You want to?
Make sense, Frank.
I've talked a lot today, so.
Yeah. So let me. I'll read this, and then there are pieces of this that I'm a little fuzzy on. Sorry. Thank you. The following was provided for us by Donna Russo Savage, Principal Assistant to the Secretary, School of Governance, Vermont Agency of Education. If the voters do not approve a unified school district, then when the state board creates the final mandatory statewide plan, it will consider everything that it has before it at the time. If the school board or one or more of the districts submits a Section 9 proposal that proposes a merger or that proposes something other than a merger, then the state board will consider that information. If a citizens group submits a proposal, then it will consider that submission and it will consider the study committee's original merger proposal and any additional information as well. The Secretary of Education prepares a proposed statewide plan, but the legislator authorized and required the state board to make the final decision. We lose the financial support offered in Act 46, tax decreases over 4 years, and grants. What happens if the merger is voted down? By December 26, 2017, the school board of each district that won't be part of a newly unified governance structure by July 1, 19 must perform the 3 tasks listed in the response to the first question. A Section 9 proposal can be submitted in advance of 12/26/17, and the Agency of Education will provide feedback. Through May 31st, 2018, the Secretary of Education reviews Section 9 proposals and has conversations with school boards about the proposal. School boards can supplement or amend Section 9 proposal as necessary. Go on again. June 1st, 18, the Secretary of Education issues a proposed statewide plan that may or may not include the Section 9 proposals. That's a key part. Note, there is no other approval process for Section 9 proposals. This is those proposals that, this is the part I wanted, maybe clarification, those proposals that might come if the merger is voted down and each school district tries to do something different under Act 46. I get that, yeah. Through November 29th, 2018, the Vermont Board of Education reviews Section 9 proposals and takes testimony about them. School boards can supplement or amend Section 9 proposals as necessary. November 30th, 2018, the Vermont Board of Education issues a statewide plan that may or may not incorporate the Section 9 proposals. Note, there is no other approval process for Section 9 proposals. The piece about that to consider is at that point, per the previous lines, the state can consider any proposal in front of it, not just the Section 9 proposal. That's the part I wanted clarification on. Okay, great. Time to answer questions. And that's right, and there is no vote. It does not come back to the community. It does not come back for any input from any individual school boards. It is simply done by the state.
Just to clarify, that's the scenario if no vote to merge is achieved by a certain date. But presumably there's another possibility, which is that there could be a no vote in 5 days, but then there could be continued deliberation and another merger or another vision for a merger could be conceived?
It would be the Section 9 proposals that's being invoked here, is what would come.
The last time, the vote needs to come to fruition by the end of November. I think it's November 30th. Yeah. So this is our last opportunity to vote.
Okay.
There could be a revote in a town that votes no?
Yes. So there's that reconsideration period possibly.
Of the same proposal.
I see.
Sure, please.
Just one more comment about that. So for folks that are not familiar with Section 9 versus some other section, so we're referring to Act 46, and I just want to make sure that we put it in the context of the whole Act. So Section 9 is the part that says if a board or a community wants to propose an alternative structure than the merger that you've heard, then that can be considered. But let me give you the context that that's in. Section 5 of Act 46 states what a preferred structure is. The preferred structure, it's pretty straightforward. It's a pre-K through grade 12 education district. There it is. And then they go on to say the preferred education governance structure in Vermont that is responsible for the education of all resident pre-K students through K-12, that it's its own district, which means it's a single employer, a single governed unit. It has a minimum of 900 students, and it's organized in a way under a standard governance structure. So the last point I want to make is that the study committee has presented to the State Board of Education as of September 20th a merger that meets the preferred structure criteria, a K through 12, pre-K through 12 single education district. The State Board of Education unanimously approved that on September 20th. So there's the context in which, a no vote would fall under.
Start it over. start over here and go that way.
Could you explain why, as we were told several times in your slide, the Act 46 would make it less likely that a small school would be closed or would close?
Sure, so it comes back to the funding formula again. So I'll use Guilford as an example. That's my home school. So we're facing some really significant financial challenges because of the funding formula and starting to weigh, the cost and the output of what we're providing to our children. And at some point in time for us, the cost will reach a point that our taxpayers are no longer willing to bear for the output that they're receiving. Especially this is where we come into the equity piece comes in. So we may not be able to provide our students with the same opportunities as some of our sister schools because our costs have just risen so high. Under a merged district, as we talked about with the cost per student, we would be able to offer more value for our money because we would be able to all the things we've just talked about, the sharing of services and being able to spread those costs out over more students. So in Guilford, our school board unanimously believes that this is a lifeline for our school because within the next several years, we fear that we're looking at a cost that might not be sustainable and something that our taxpayers may not, be willing to take a huge tax jump in their tax rate as we, provide equitable services to our children. Under a merged district, we would have that protection because those costs would be spread out over more students.
But it would still be the choice of the townspeople, whether or not they would, funding notwithstanding, whether they would close or not.
Yes, if we do not merge.
If you do not merge,
Yes.
it would definitely be the choice of the individual town.
Yes.
Actually, so the question was that even under a non-merged district, a merged situation where we have individual school districts, it would still be the town members who would choose that. On the other hand, what I would say is, yeah, but it wouldn't be, because in the end, the numbers will dictate your choice. And that's,
And one other thing, so the question is, isn't it still the town's choice to close a school in the event that you don't merge? And the answer is maybe not, as Richard is saying, because the law again says that the State Board of Education must develop a statewide plan by fiscal year 2020. And they will make a decision as to whether they accept an alternative structure or they perceive that the preferred structure is the most equitable educational opportunity at an affordable cost. So it's amazing.
Penelope Simpson-Adams. So I want to go back to the issue of our special education and our healthcare staffing costs, because Putney, in my time of being here, has always been an incredible educational program, and people move here for our special education services. I don't know what it's like recently. It's been several years since I've been paying attention, so I'm not sure what the percentage of our budget now goes to special ed as it used to, and are those increasing? Is that a trajectory that keeps getting bigger and bigger? And of course, healthcare is going to get bigger and bigger. So my other part of this question is, it's kind of like Brexit, because I'm connected to England. Will people want to come to our school because we have really good special ed? Are people going to, flow in from other parts of the district, and how will that impact us?
So Lyle is the best person to address this.
So a few years ago, we were required through Vermont statute to consolidate special ed. And we did that so that now all special educators are hired through WSESU, And we found a tremendous savings, $300,000 in the first year, I believe $700,000 in the second year, and that's because we have the ability to use our special educators where they are most needed. So actually, I believe there's a new program here at Putney Central. It has students from a variety of schools, and we are able to put the special educator with those children that are best suited to teach those children. So that special ed is now not just Putney. Special ed is looked at across all schools, and we can do what's really best for those kids and match them with teachers that are best for them.
She actually had similar questions as I do. And regarding the special education, does that mean that there still will be special education services within all of the schools inside the districts? Okay, that's good. And also I was wondering regarding like parents being able to choose where they go. If they see these certain achievement gaps, like what if some families decide to pull students from the schools that are struggling academically, like how will that fare for those particular schools?
Our thought for that is that if a school is struggling academically, we would be able to have more resources at that school. So for some schools now, we have Title I. We don't have Title I in all schools. We have some locally funded academic support teachers who work with students with interventions, but that's limited because they're paid for through local funds. By consolidating, we could hire additional interventionists and really target the students that need that help by spreading that cost again among more students, but putting teachers where they would best be used.
Stay with people who haven't spoken yet, if we could, for the moment.
I really want to thank you for the work that you folks have put in and the expertise you've developed. Asking a question like this, it's kind of a big picture question. It's hard because I'm such a lay person compared to the amount of time and effort and information you guys have poured through and analyzed. So I want to acknowledge that. But it's a little bit like a daunting question because it's kind of like talking to a rocket scientist when you're a person who doesn't think the rocket should be shot off, but the rocket scientist has lots of information. So with that in mind, I'm curious how all of you, and I see this whole issue as kind of a disagreement within a family. Certainly people, feel very intensely. My question is, as I drive through Putney and Dummerston and the other towns, I have never seen such a tsunami of yard signs saying, vote no, save our schools. I mean, one facile response to that would be, everyone's misinformed. We have a bunch of stupid people. But I know you wouldn't, but I know you don't believe that. People are so thoughtful and care so much about the schools. I'm just curious how you make sense of the fact that for I just see nothing but signs saying save our schools. We want to hold on to this. I don't think so many hundreds or thousands of people can be just misinformed on this. What do you attribute that to?
It's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, I see those signs too every day as I go to work, as I cut through from Putney into Dummerston and down into Brattleboro. And it's difficult for me because having been in this process and having focused on having my own thinking evolve around what does it mean to talk about our children. I mean, that's what it comes down to for me. And when I think about talking to our meaning, in this particular building, our faculty about the experiences that they have with the students who are here, students who shift between buildings, to Guilford, to Vernon, to Brattleboro, and then back to us again, all within months, right? The notion of whether who counts as our students becomes real to me. And so where I would respectfully disagree with some of those signs is that the real issue is about who you think our children are. And are they only the people who happen to live within the boundaries of Putney? Or are they children in Dummerston, and children in Brattleboro, and children in Guilford? And we could even go beyond that, children in Vermont as a whole, because the things that we're dealing with are much bigger than Putney. You know, they're not things that we have control over. I fear that in my what I've said to you today has focused a little bit too much on money and the funding formula, but so much depends upon that. And so I come back to that question about what is our community and who are our children. And this process for me has really given me the burden that not just the students in this building are our children, but our students in BAMS are our children. Students in BAMS.
Yeah, this is a great question. Here's a couple of brief comments. One is, we haven't really tackled governance reform in Vermont for public education since Phil Hoff brought it about. So many of you in the room may have folks that remember the struggle. I was pretty young then. I wasn't around, but it was a tremendous struggle, but it's one that has not been revisited for more than 50 years. The last time, and that took a very long time. It went into the early 1970s where we created the union school, movement in Vermont, and that's where you saw, so many of the schools right in our region, union schools formed. So it's been a dormant issue for many, many years, decades. So it's just unfamiliar, number one. Number two is 1996, we still don't understand generally the school funding formula that Richard is ascribing as a central issue. And because of that, this idea that avoiding the merger will save the small school. Oops, sorry. There we go. Really makes it difficult to make the connection between what Richard has been saying most of the evening and this idea of we will lose our small schools if we merge. It actually, the state has said it themselves that the merger is a way to sustain the small schools. I think Beth articulated the point very clearly as well. However, it's complex. The funding formula is complex, so the folks, I don't want to speak for them, but I have heard them in our 2 years of meetings. I've heard their concerns, and it does not appear that they bring the manifestation of this cost per student funding formula implication as I thought Richard did it as well as I've ever heard. Many of our schools, as you saw on the chart, are right at the spending cap. So these small incremental program improvements that we want to address, we are bumping up against the ceiling. We have been for 5 and 6 years, and because enrollment hasn't changed, now we are actually eroding programs. So this merger does save the small school as you look at the state context. And they make the rules, and they have created this law.
I want to add one thing from just an opinion about what John said, because I see it too every day. I am a part owner in a property down in the center of town. I have 3 days running now pulled signs out that were placed there by other people. I find that very frustrating, very disrespectful. I think my opinion is if you look at the residences that actually have signs in front of them, it's a relatively small percentage of the residences in Putney, but they're very visible signs. My strictly anecdotal perspective on this is it's a relatively small, very well-funded group who are making a very significant effort to get those signs out there and very visible. That's my opinion.
We're going to just go for a couple more minutes.
As a member of that group, I can tell you we're very much not well-funded.
Buying a lot of signs.
Yeah, well, we didn't spend thousands of taxpayer dollars sending out mailings advocating our positions, so I wouldn't be calling them, have the pot called the kettle black. In terms of the question of your piece, Richard, about thinking of it as all of our children, I endorse that. I think that's a terrific attitude, and I think it's accurate. That's not the issue. The issue is whether or not small, locally controlled schools will do that level of caring better than a large, unified board. That's really the issue. When the chairman of the Senate Education Committee talked to me about Act 46, he was very clear. They did not expect it to save money. They did not expect it to preserve local schools. They had to have something to tell people, we're trying to do something about property taxes. They knew it wouldn't, but it was a sop to people who kept complaining when their legislators came home that property taxes were too high. It may well be that it will be a way of saving a school like Guilford. On the other hand, I suspect it's much more likely that the first action 5 years from now that a mega board would do would be to shut Guilford down and to examine whether, well, you can shake your head, but you don't have any more of a crystal ball than I do. And I suspect that middle school programs in the outlying towns would be looked at primarily in terms of dollars and cents, and they would be very clearly threatened. This are, as you say, these are the financial pressures that are going to be on any school board, and they're going to be on that board. And how a town cherishes its local school environment is not going to be big on the list. What's going to be big on the list is dollars and cents. And I suspect that the alternatives that are available to us and the group that has been meeting to discuss alternative governance, which for reasons that I don't understand, Putney has steadfastly refused to participate in.
That's not true. That is not true. She is
Officially. An official Putney representative from the board. You were appointed by the board. Wonderful. I take that back. Thank you. I appreciate that immensely. Thank you. Because my understanding was that that was not the case. But sharing resources and sharing teachers are certainly possible, and they're happening all over the state in different formats. Wonderful idea. I hope it can happen here.
I'm going to go against somebody who hasn't spoken.
Good evening. You touched for a moment on Act 46, Section 9, but you actually didn't mention that Act 46, Section 9 specifically talks about enhanced school supervisory unions and discusses the possibility of adding additional towns beyond the current supervisory union, including potentially non-contiguous towns. And so I wonder if this does not pass in Putney. I understand if it passes in Putney, it's a little different. But if it doesn't pass in Putney, will the board be actively engaging with other communities with AGS movements to try to find a way forward to an alternative proposal to submit to the state? Not simply, I feel like the discussion is as if each town is going to be submitting its own Act 46, Section 9, which would not be effective, perhaps. But perhaps there is some room where more districts join together beyond Wyndham Southeast.
Somebody's going to address that.
Yeah, of course we do that.
One more minute, because we said 8:30 and we're past that 8:30.
Maggie had her hand up first, and then we'll.
I have a very specific question about equity. School choice, as it is outlined in the articles, says something about being limited by socioeconomic factors and resources of each school and so forth. It strikes me that in Vermont, transportation is a socioeconomic issue, and I don't see buses in a network crisscrossing the unified district to bring students to and from schools that they choose to go to. I can imagine buses taking special ed students, because we have obligations to special ed students to sites where they will be best served. But I'm wondering what the committee's take on that particular issue was. Thank you.
We actually have one more question as well. Then we really
Then we're done.
I'm sorry,
Okay,
we're over.
This is for everybody to see. Section 9 proposals are a supervisory union with member districts, and they would have to meet the same criteria that the preferred thing, merger thing does. This is a map of Vermont as it currently stands. The grays have merged. The pink, I don't know if you can see, is outlined in black. Those are all, there's 11 of them. They are supervisory unions who are submitting alternative governance proposals. There's a reason for that, a lot of reasons. It does preserve your local school board, but we have found that the things that are offered under a merger, except for the bribe money there, the $150,000 and your tax incentives, can be accomplished through different mechanisms under an alternative structure. We care about all the children in Wyndham Southeast. There's a possibility that Vernon could participate in this, and so we wouldn't be kicking Vernon to the door. So there's, there is, in all likelihood, the state of Vermont is not going to come and put its big foot down on 11 supervisory unions that submit proposals that meet the criteria of Act 46. And I have been working on this full time since the end of November.
So we're going to have Laz answer the question, and then we're going to adjourn.
Back to Maggie's question. We looked at a lot of different things when we talked about school choice. We know that there are now buses that come from Brattleboro, Dummerston, into Putney, back through Dummerston, down, back to Brattleboro, to the high school. Guilford has their own buses, so that would be something that we'd work out. But we felt like there are enough buses in so many places more than once that transportation would not be a barrier. We were concerned that so many people might want to come to Putney that we would have to ensure that we weren't having to hire new teachers, so there would be caps that way. But we tried to look at lots of different factors when we talked about school choice.
I know this has gone on for a while, but thank you so much. I want us to take a moment to thank Amy, who already had to leave, and Beth, who came specifically out of town to come and give their perspective to this process. We may be available a little bit afterwards to answer more specific questions, but if you have anything you'd like to ask us, please ask. Thank you very much.
Take care.